You know, you often hear that history is written by the winners, usually with swords and armies. But what if I told you about a time when an empire, centuries old and seemingly invincible, was brought to its knees not just by an army, but by an idea? We're talking about a concept so powerful it would go on to define the destiny of China for thousands of years. So, let's dive in.
It just seems kind of backward, doesn't it? I mean, how can a simple belief, a story about who deserves to rule, be more decisive than pure brute force? Well, that's exactly what happened here. And honestly, it's a lesson in power that still echoes today. All right, so before we can really get to the revolution, you have to understand the power that it replaced. We've got to journey back, way back, to the second millennium BCE, to a kingdom of gleaming bronze and ancient ritual, the world of the mighty Shang dynasty.
And look, don't think of the Shang as just some small local power. No way. For centuries, they were the power, totally dominating the heartland of ancient China right along the Yellow River. They were the ones setting the standard for culture, for technology, for really what it even meant to be a civilization back then. The reason we know so much about them is because of all the incredible stuff they left behind. I mean, archaeologists have found these amazing oracle bones. They're basically turtle shells with the earliest known Chinese writing on them. The kings used them to try and speak to the gods. And then there's their bronze work. These massive, incredibly detailed vessels, not for eating dinner, but for these super elaborate rituals. This wasn't just a powerful kingdom, it was a civilization completely connected to the divine.
Seriously, everything about the Shang just screamed permanence. They had a rigid social structure, a really fearsome army, this vibrant culture. You'd look at them and think, yeah, these guys are built to last forever. But you know, history always has a way of finding the cracks in even the strongest walls.
And that growing vulnerability, well, it didn't go unnoticed. Way out on the western frontier, another power was watching. They were learning, and they were waiting. So it's time to meet the challengers, the Zhou.
Now, the Zhou weren't just some random invading horde. They were neighbors, out on the frontier, but absolutely part of the same cultural world as the Shang. For years, they were basically absorbing Shang culture and technology, all while quietly building up their own strength and their own identity. You can think of them as the understudies, just waiting in the wings for their big moment.
So what happened, right? How does an empire that seems totally invincible suddenly start to crumble from the inside out? Well, the story that comes down to us, and you have to remember, it was mostly written by the Zhou later, paints this picture of a dynasty in a total moral freefall. The last Shang king is described as this horrible, corrupt tyrant who ticked everybody off. Now, we should probably take that with a grain of salt, but it almost certainly points to a real crisis of leadership and stability going on inside the Shang court. And all this tension, all this weakness, it finally just explodes right around 1046 BC. This is it. At the Battle of Mue, the Zhou army, led by their king Wu, met the Shang forces for what would be a final, decisive showdown. And what's wild is that the battle was over fast. The Shang just fell apart. But this, right here, is where our real story begins. Because believe it or not, winning the war, that was the easy part. Now the Zhou faced a much, much trickier problem. How do you convince everyone that you, the guys who used to be the subjects, are now the rightful rulers?
Their solution wasn't another army. It wasn't more force. It was an idea. An idea so profound it would become the political and spiritual backbone of China for the next 3,000 years. They called it the Mandate of Heaven.
I mean, just imagine being the new Zhou leaders. This is the question that's keeping you up at night. You can't just say, hey, we won, so we're in charge now. That's not going to last. To build a real dynasty, you need a justification that's bigger than just you. You need a moral argument.
And this was their stroke of pure genius. The right to rule, they argued, isn't some birthright. It's a divine permission slip, a mandate that's granted by this cosmic moral force they called heaven. And here's the real kicker. That mandate is conditional. Heaven gives it to a just and good ruler, but heaven can and will take it away from a corrupt one.
Okay, so the logic works kind of like a big cosmic cycle. Step 1, heaven grants a family the right to rule. Simple enough. Step 2, that family has to govern justly to keep it. But then, step 3, if they become corrupt, if you start seeing disasters pop up like famines or floods, well, that's a pretty big sign they've lost heaven's favor. And that brings us to step 4. That opens the door for a new, more virtuous leader to step up and take over, starting the whole cycle again. And, guess who the Zhou claimed was that new, virtuous choice?
And you have to understand, this was so much more than just a clever political excuse for a takeover. This one single idea would echo down through the centuries, shaping the absolute core of Chinese political thought.
Just stop and think about that for a second. An idea that was cooked up to solve one specific political problem back in the Bronze Age became the fundamental operating system for Chinese politics for the next 3,000 years. Every single dynasty that rose and fell from then on would be explained through this exact lens. The impact is just staggering.
So what made it so powerful? Well, it did everything at once. It basically created a moral report card for the emperor. His power wasn't absolute. He had a sacred duty to his people. It explained why things were good when a just ruler was in charge, but it also, and this is so key, it gave people a legitimate reason to overthrow a bad one. It meant that authority always had to be earned. It wasn't just given.
Which, of course, brings us all the way back to the beginning. The Zhou's victory wasn't just won on the field of battle. It was won in the realm of ideas. They proved that real, lasting power isn't just about force, it's about legitimacy. That shared belief that a ruler actually has the right to rule. In the end, their story was way more powerful than the Shang swords.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. The Zhou found their answer in the mandate of heaven. But it's a question every single society has to answer for itself. So what about us? In our world today, what gives a leader the right to rule? What is our mandate?